Hello everyone, here Emily at Classic Lit with Emily. Today I have a very exciting video since it's the holiday season. I am going to discuss in depth A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens, some facts you may not know, how this work is important to the literary canon, some interesting concepts you might want to think about regarding the Christmas Carol if you are a literature major in college or high school, you want to write a paper about it and how it's important to the holiday season and to classic literature itself. And I'm going to show you all my beautiful Christmas Carol versions since I collect it as my favorite book of all time, including my absolutely gorgeous, which I have a little spot on it, Easton Press Christmas Carol edition here, leather bound, with the original beautiful art done by Robert Inkpen, who done a lot of children's literature illustrations and everything. I will, at the end of this video, at the end of my lecture, I'll go to my overhead camera and show you the inside of some of these different versions. But briefly, I will show you, I have this beautiful leather bound. This is my favorite. I actually have the Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens, a Barnes& Noble Chiltern Classics, which has this gold embossed design to it. I will show you. I have a vintage mini full version of A Christmas Carol in this teeny tiny little book. I'll show you in my overhead camera. I also have this one, which was a gift years ago by Stuart Tabor. It's a British company, A Christmas Carol, which has different illustrations in it. This is the one I read for years, up until I got my Easton Press edition. And then I have my mega other Easton Press book I got from my father, Charles Dickens's complete novels of Christmas, including Christmas Carol, which my dad engraved, wrote in for me years ago before he died. So I will show you this one as well. And I have this little one, Christmas with Charles Dickens, which is something I picked up on Amazon, which has actually 3 different Christmas stories that are not Christmas Carol that I'd never even heard of, which is kind of exciting. It's a cute little one. It's a great stocking stuffer. I will show you that as well. And I'll also link below. If I can find all these versions wherever are still available, I'll link it below in the drop-down menu for your purchase. But what I really want to do is discuss A Christmas Carol with you. This book is monumentally important to the literary canon of not only holiday literature, but Victorian era and British literature. And it's amazing to me how many people have never read it, but everybody knows the story because of the Disney Jim Carrey movie or because of all the other Christmas Carol movies and renditions of it into plays and books and stories. And in fact, the on the internet you can find there's a total of over 100 movies versions of some form of the Christmas Carol historically ever done. So I don't know how many are available, where you can find them, but I was very surprised because I'm limited to my top 4 or 5 that I really like. But the Christmas Carol was written in 1843. That is literally 181 years ago. 181 years ago, Charles Dickens wrote in a flurry of rush and stress in a period of 6 weeks due to pressing financial concerns, whipped out this gem that little did he know would be for 181 years or more be studied and be loved and read and taught in schools and put into motion pictures and put into plays and put into children's books and used as what in a lot of countries the new sort of version of how we celebrate Christmas is based upon the messages that are absolutely critical and significant in A Christmas Carol. I just think it's fascinating to think of how he existed during his time and he pumped out this little book and had no clue of the legacy it would leave. Yeah, so I think that's very fascinating. And so yeah, this book is something that if you haven't read it, you need to read it, but don't read it for entertainment, read it to study. This is a book that I teach when I teach literature, also at the college when I teach descriptive writing. In fact, for fiction writing, for descriptive writing, I use passages from A Christmas Carol to show what brilliant descriptive writing looks like to describe a character. And I'm going to read a passage for you to help you understand that here shortly. But anyway, Dickens was the first famous author in his time to read aloud his novel or his novella, let's say, to the public. It wasn't really a thing back then to give readings, and he did this starting 10 years after its publication, and he did it up until the time that he died. In fact, Mark Twain attended one of his readings, and when Dickens was a little bit older, and he hated it. He made a comment that it was heartless, lacked heart, and it was nothing but fluff and frostbite, or some actually very interesting descriptive analogy that he used. I don't remember what it was, but so that's actually really surprises me. And this is when Mark Twain was, younger. I think Charles Dickens was in his 50s at the time. But his first reading, Charles Dickens' first reading of A Christmas Carol, took place in front of 2,000 people in the city of Birmingham, England, and it was 10 years after, and people turned out for it year after year. In fact, he gave his last reading of it not long before he died. So, in essence, A Christmas Carol is a Gothic piece of literature, and I will discuss how A Christmas Carol is Gothic. We'll get to that in a little bit, but I'm going to talk a little bit about the significance of why A Christmas Carol is such an important book. And there are many reasons it's an important book, but mostly because one, it's brilliant writing, two, it's entertaining, three, it's a tradition in households that is beloved. It teaches people how they can create their own futures by changing in the now. It teaches the true meaning of Christmas. It teaches friendship, generosity, forgiveness, love, community, doing for ourselves and others, going into the new year, becoming better and fresher and evolving human beings. All things that were, in the Victorian era, we get more into the kind of Enlightenment due to Prince Albert. He was really into innovations and self-improvement and technological improvement, and more self-awareness, and the concept of psychology and improving ourselves, and how changing ourselves and our behaviors and our lanes of thinking can influence those things around us. So this book, Christmas Carol, really, if you look at the character of Scrooge, he's the perfect example of how that can come to be. So, but really, Christmas Carol is probably the most important because it revived Christmas traditions during their time, and it really, back then when things were very dismal and bleak, and there's a lot of poverty and suffering and child slavery and in the workhouses, and Christmas was kind of a dying thing. It really brought to life the spirit of Christmas, highlighting, themes of redemption, grace, again, generosity, social responsibility, while also serving as this kind of like powerful critique of Victorian era poverty and suffering and greediness and the division of the classes, the poor class and the working class and the upper class. So it's really a timeless message of personal transformation, obviously, Christmas Carol through the character of Scrooge. And it's just the concept of empathy, and how even the most miserable person can evolve and resonate love and empathy, and appreciate the shortness and the gift of life while you still have it. So we get into the beautiful writing example, but it's really a very entertaining story. Ghost stories were very popular in the Victorian era, and this is what leads into it qualifying as a Gothic story. But I think really, Christmas Carol was an immediate success when it was written. It was written, like I said, in a very short period. It was thrown out there. It was entirely sold out on Christmas Eve. It was released before Christmas Eve. It sold out the first printing super fast, and not enough people could get their hands on it. And word of mouth, it just spread like wildfire there. It's not like something that had ever been seen in these Victorian era like communities, in Victorian London, countryside, and it was kind of an inspirational lull, a pull of hope, and something people hadn't seen before, and everybody was drawn to it once they would read it, and then it would spread word of mouth. And so, anyway, the idea for Christmas Carol came from when Charles Dickens was in Manchester giving a speech about ignorance and want, which is poverty and lack and need and starvation and suffering and things like that. And as he was leaving that speech, walking home from that speech, his own words and the crowd's response to him influenced him so much that suddenly the idea for the story popped into his head. And he had already like been struggling for an idea for a book. He was in a kind of a writer's lull. He was running out of money, so the publishers were putting pressure on him. Um, so anyway, the story that came out of that speech, it was A Christmas Carol. He wrote it, like I said, really fast, and I think it actually was released December 19th and sold out on the 24th, Christmas Eve, if I recall correctly. I have to fact check that, but I'm pretty sure. So when we talk about the Christmas Carol as something that is qualified as to fit into the literary canon for its example of quality English literature that is forever, almost memorialized and idealized. There are multiple reasons why Christmas Carol qualifies for the literary canon. And one is the depth of the themes in it are universal themes, right? Is need, suffering, generosity, loneliness and isolation, the sense of community, the desire and need for personal change and improvement, fighting against Victorian poverty in a Dickinson, world. So the messages in A Christmas Carol are so profound and even deeper than we really think about. So, character development is another reason Charles Dickens did a brilliant job with his characterization. I'll talk about in a minute with all of the characters, Scrooge obviously in particular, going from a miser to a philanthropist. It's a very complex and interesting study in psychological, behavioral development. The literary craft, we know Charles Dickens is a brilliant writer, and just the most prolific, amazing writer. He's one of my favorite authors of all time. His works also have had a cultural impact across ages, through time, and throughout countries, throughout different communities and social statuses, and it's encouraged the wealthy to be more generous. It's encouraged the poor to be more compassionate toward those who have more than them and more grateful. There's a lot of different cultural impacts that match the charitable giving concept that comes with Christmas, and the concept of like festive goodwill and good tidings to all. It's just, that really brought the story to such importance. And the genre blending, right? So we have the Gothic. It's a morality tale. It's a human evolution tale, but it's also a Gothic genre, as I mentioned, and also a little bit of a fairy tale, a little bit of a modern fairy tale. It has some fairy tale-like elements, which I can talk about as well. But in essence, Christmas Carol is canonized because it's just a brilliantly told story, just covers the most important emotions and thought processes and behaviors that make a human being a good human being, and more of what we need in the world, and the possibility of hope and social duty and whatnot. Now, I wanted to read you briefly, and I have to switch to my reading glasses because these are my computer glasses, so I can see if I'm still recording or not on my camera. I wanted to read to you here. We talked about the brilliance of Charles Dickens's character development and descriptive writing, but I would say that Charles Dickens's written description of Scrooge is probably one of the most skilled and talented and sensational, perfect passage of piece of writing, section of writing that brings a character from a flat piece of paper to life with not even having to see him on a screen. You may have heard this before. Oh, but he was a tight-fisted hand at the grindstone. Scrooge, a squeezing, wrenching, grasping, scraping, clutching, covetous old sinner. Just that first line, you already have this picture of him, this brilliant use of language to really get into the depth of this miserable person. Hard and sharp as flint, covetous, oh, yeah, hard and sharp as flint, from which no steel had ever struck out fire. Secret, self-contained, and solitary as an oyster. Great comparison. Solitary like an oyster, hard and sharp as flint. The cold within him froze his old features, nipped his pointed nose, shriveled his cheek, stiffened his gait, made out his eyes red, his thin lips blue, and spoke out shrewdly in his grating voice. A frosty rime was on his head and on his eyebrows, and his wiry chin. He carried his own low temperature always about with him. He iced his coffee in the dog days and didn't thaw it 1 degree at Christmas. That is one paragraph, one introduction to this character. We now have this unique literary character just from this one passage. That what else does this passage do? What else does it do? This is on the only the second page of the story. It sets the tone for the story. It brings it into the Gothic using weather to give the aura and the feel of the frosty, cold, miserable um, environment of the time period of when the story takes place. This is what puts it into the Gothic. It also sets the stage for bringing out the ghosts, cold and foggy and crispy. It also helps the weather, the description of Scrooge being cold and frosty with frost on his eyebrows and like blue lips and crusty icy skin. They wouldn't be he wouldn't be described like that if it was summertime, right? So the purpose of describing the character like this somehow allows us to see his cold insides, the emotionless, frigid, cruel, compassionless part. But it also helps set the setting of the time period, the Christmas season, the weather, and it helps set a mood. The description of him sets the mood of frigidness and lack of love, and just everyone's freezing out everywhere and avoiding each other and staying indoors. And he's like he just makes everything feel more cold when he walks by. So it's just a really brilliant piece of descriptive writing for characterization. External heat and cold had little influence on Scrooge. No warmth could warm, no wintry weather chill him. No wind that blew was bitterer than he. See, here we get into comparing him to weather. No falling snow was more intent upon its purpose, no pelting rain less open to entreaty. Foul weather didn't know where to have him. The heaviest rain and snow and hail and sleet could boast of the advantages over him in only one respect. They often came down handsomely, but Scrooge never did. Nobody ever stopped him in the street to say with gladsome looks, "My dear Scrooge, how are you? When will you come to see me?" No beggars implored him to bestow a trifle. No children asked him what it was o'clock. No man or woman ever once in all his life inquired the way to such and such a place of Scrooge. Even the blinds man dogs appeared to know him, and when they saw him coming on, would tug their owners into doorways and up the courts, and then they would wag their tails as though they said, "No eye at all is better than an evil eye, dark master." So even through the perception of animals, animals know he's bad and frosty and miserable and something to avoid. So we get more characterization development of Scrooge through how animals view him, because most animals are attracted to nice people. Animals are repelled by him. We see how the local townspeople, no one will ask him for directions or for help or ask him for something because they know that they avoid him like the plague. So we get more character development through the eyes of meaningless cardboard characters in the community that aren't even named. So just this first page brings him to life. So this is such the brilliance of Charles Dickens, and Scrooge is one of the not only a fantastic piece of writing, but it's really something we haven't really seen a lot of with the depth of characterization until A Christmas Carol was written. Even in some of his other novels, characters weren't that vivid, So that is one reason why we study this book in college, why it's something that should be read if you really want to know what good writing is. So Christmas Carol, right. So Christmas Carol, let's get into some of the analyzing some of the story. Christmas Carol, being a novella, really analyzes Victorian issues of poverty, of wealth, focusing on Scrooge's profound transformation, like I said, from the lonely, miserable, hateful, isolated man into a generous and compassionate figure driven by the Christmas spirit. He finds redemption. He discovers the importance of community, the true meaning of Christmas, by confronting his mistakes, by confronting the past, by understanding that if he changes himself, he can make an influence and impact on the world, and he can have a better, more joy for the rest of his life. So this is where the self-development, the self-awareness aspect, that's kind of a new thing in this kind of Victorian era, this enlightenment we start to see through the character of Scrooge. So some of the key themes we see in the Christmas Carol, like I said, are social injustice, social justice and injustice, charity, isolation versus community, the contrast between wealth and poverty, dark versus light, good versus bad, cold versus warmth, not only in the temperature, like the outdoor cold to going in, like to the nephew's house later in the book, to the warmth of the fireside and the Christmas Eve celebration or Christmas morning celebration, the light versus day. So, so the book really had two significant impacts on the Western culture. Now, if you've seen the movie The Man Who Invented Christmas, very good movie with the main character who plays Matthew in Downton Abbey, who I love, whose name I can't remember, but I love him so much. He played Charles Dickens, and that book is about how he came up and wrote Christmas Carol. Which, if you haven't seen it, definitely take a look. I think I saw it free on HBO Max or something like that, somewhere streaming. But yeah, so he Dickens is really credited for having invented the modern Christmas we to this day, to some degree, celebrate. He helped set the image of a more modern Christmas, a more meaningful Christmas, a joy of giving and receiving. But really, Christmas Carol at the time was sort of an extension of Charles Dickens's commitment to social reform. So in the novella, a lot of his other books, Hard Times and Oliver Twist, there's a lot of child suffering, child slavery, children in the workhouses, child abuse. And Charles Dickens himself experienced that his own childhood. He's one of the few famous authors, unlike many famous authors during that era who came from wealthy backgrounds. He came from a poverty background. His father was imprisoned for debts for overspending. They do show a little bit of that in that movie as well. His childhood experience influenced his work and influenced A Christmas Carol, showing the ugly truth of poverty and showing it on the faces of and the description of characters in his books. Charles Dickens really felt that children shouldn't be denied the necessities compared to adults. He opposed the way the upper and middle class treated the poor. He detected a lack of empathy between the two classes. He was aware of some attempts to help the poor, but a lot of the time during this Victorian era, those helps were rejected. It wasn't as common to be charitable and to be helpful, and everybody was kind of for themselves. You know what I'm saying? He also didn't like how the disabled were ignored. So that's where we see the character of Tiny Tim entered into a Christmas Carol. If you really realize it, Tiny Tim's injury, the bad leg, was never explained, but it's indicated it's due to poverty because when Scrooge comes in and gives the family money and gives them the Christmas turkey and becomes the mentor for Tiny Tim, he survives and he's healed practically. So it's indicated that Tiny Tim's disability is due to poverty, lack of having money to get him fixed, something of that nature. Um, so, so I think that when Dickens was writing A Christmas Carol, English society was starting to really rapidly change, like I mentioned, due to the Industrial Revolution. As I talked about Prince Albert, England was changing from an agricultural society more to a industrial society. More people were moving to cities. More people were working in factories. The earlier Christmas traditions or lack of them, um, depending on the class. So the earlier tradition that amongst the Gregorians, the Georgia, some people call them the Georgians or Gregorians, um, the era prior, let's just say to the Victorian era, depending on how you want to pronounce it, really was lavish and elaborate and known for its lavish feasts and the big manors hosting just these overkill kind of Marie Antoinette style parties and holiday traditions, some that lasted for up to 12 days. Um, but that started to fall out of favor after a while, due to industrialization, urbanization, and more of the poor class suffering during the holiday traditions, while this upper class wealthy were flourishing, and that started creating problems. And people in the cities, as they moved out of the agriculture and more into the cities, didn't really know how to celebrate Christmas outside of like a charming country small Christmas that they would have, the suburban Christmas or the rural Christmas. So Charles Dickens's novel Christmas Carol really showed how you can celebrate Christmas in a big city like London during the time. So the Christmas Carol was very influential in developing um, Christmas, how it took a turn from then thus to now. So there are a lot of really important messages we get in the Christmas Carol or lessons. One of the biggest, and this is something you can write about if you're writing an essay, one of the biggest lessons taught in A Christmas Carol is don't be so obsessed with making money and working that you lose sight of people in your life, family, and having social connections. Scrooge did. He lost the love of his life. He lost what his sister. He had a wonderful role model in Fezziwig, but he forgot the lessons he learned there, and he isolated himself and became a workaholic and lost all of his joy. And I do know people like that. My son, one of my sons, is like that, and it is really he didn't put up a tree this year. All he does is work 12-hour days. Um, I think the message of that to this day that holds over from Christmas Carol is to treat our employees with gratitude and respect. Like Bob Cratchit, he's a faithful, hardworking, low-paid employee, yet Scrooge abuses him, begrudges him, doesn't even want to give him one day to spend with his family, doesn't want to let him put more coal in the fire. So he learns through the ghost that Tiny Tim is in really bad shape and will die because of Scrooge's neglect of Tiny Tim's father, his employee. And that really changes him. It really shows him the importance of rewarding and treating your employees as they deserve so they can meet their family's needs. And to this day, especially with the current things going on in the world, it's still hard, right? It's getting harder, in fact. So it's important. Another lesson that's taught is how important community is, showing compassion to the community, trying to share what we have, to provide service and value where we can. So early in A Christmas Carol, Scrooge has, the men come around, the very first scene, quote, or act, for stave and come around and try to collect money for the poor, and Scrooge shoos them away. There's enough prisons, I shouldn't have to give money, there's this, and like he pushes them away and he rejects. This is something Charles Dickens was trying to teach in the book, that there have had been attempts at the time to donate more to the poor, and a lot of the upper class rejected it because they didn't understand the need and the importance and how they are are significant in the community due to their wealth, to the overall success of the community. And then finally, another message really taught in the story is that it's never too late to change. It doesn't matter how old you are, you can go back to school, you can do better, you can be more loving. And my father was kind of like that. He wasn't like a Scrooge, but he was never very loving, affectionate, huggy, feely, I love you kind of stuff. My parents were married 45 years. My mom died. My dad lived 9 more years, almost 10 more years after that. Got married second time for a few years toward the end there, but he completely toward the end changed. So in the last couple of years, he hugged us all the time. He was much more interested in us. He asked us questions. He said, "I love you" a lot more. He was very different. And it made a big impact on me and my boys, who are adults, that so now we're not left with the image of how he was all those other years. So it really is important. And I think in A Christmas Carol, it really shows us it's never too late to change. It doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter how old you are. You may only have 1 week left of your life and you can change. You can do something good. You can do better. You can treat people better. You can say all the right things. So the concept is to keep Christmas in your heart all year round, to be loving and kind and generous and make time for family and support your community. So yeah, so Scrooge changed his attitudes, and it was like the smallest stone in the water created a ripple effect that spread and changed everything everywhere. I think that's really the most important message in the story. So there, a little side note here, there are Christmas Carol and the character of Scrooge influenced the archetype of characters for other Christmas movies and other characters in movies or literature in general. For example, what is it? Gosh, Home Alone, the first Home Alone movie. There's what's the other one? The Next Door Neighbor they call him Mr. Marley. He's mean and scary and Scrooge-like and the old gray beard, and he's estranged from his son and can't see his grandchild, and everyone's afraid of him until Kevin McAllister spends a little time to get to know him, and suddenly he reforms at the end and gets to be reunited with his daughter in the very last scene of Home Alone, and I'm sorry, his son and his granddaughter. Also, the Grinch. The Grinch was heavily inspired by Scrooge, the character of the Grinch. Highly by Dr. Seuss inspired by so many other examples that are non-Christmas books as well. You can look it up, but those are just a few examples. Um, so I really think that it's important to think about. We can get into, let's talk about why the Christmas Carol is considered a Gothic story. Like I mentioned, ghost stories have been around since the beginning of time in Gothic literature, all the way back to the 1700s, starting with the Castle of Otranto. But ghost stories were very popular in England, especially in the winter, because there was no playing outside. That it was cold, it was miserable. They barely had heat even inside. Everybody huddled indoors and tried to stay warm, and they would read and tell stories. So ghost stories were a nice distraction from the suffering and the misery that happened in the winter in Victorian England. I think that if we can get into talking a little bit about the Gothic. So let's talk about what makes A Christmas Carol a Gothic story or novella. We mentioned already the weather. So characterization of the Gothic comes with fog, wetness, darkness, dampness, miserable environmental outdoor surroundings that we see that clearly from page one in A Christmas Carol. We have Scrooge's big old empty, creepy, kind of haunted manor where he goes home to in the first act alone and warms only one room and the rest of the house is dark and cold, and that's when the ghosts come in. So we have an old, cold, drafty manor, similar for the Gothic. We have supernatural elements, which we see in the Gothic when the ghosts come around. We have heightened emotions. We have through the characters, even through Scrooge's maid, we have fear, dread from seeing the ghosts. We have the overemphasis on like the realization Scrooge has later, the of love that floods in, kind of like the Grinch, the love that floods in and the heart that opens, and these heightened sort of sublime emotions every which way, and these realities that are just so overpowering. We have also then the male character, similar male character who has to have a transformation, who becomes heroic, which we see in Scrooge. There are other elements as well, but you can definitely use A Christmas Carol as an example of Gothic writing if you would like, if you're writing an essay, and there's a lot more to that. I could do a whole video on A Christmas Carol as a piece of Gothic literature. So, but I think that for some people may not understand from a Christmas Carol a lot of I want to go back to a major theme in the Christmas Carol, which is child suffering and poverty. And it wasn't so much directly said in the book, but we see there are some indications in the original through the artwork. So in the very first edition of the book, there were the illustrations were done by John Leech. And under the stave of The Ghost of Christmas Present, where Scrooge comes across two wretched, miserable children called Ignorance and Want. Well, in the Victorian sense, want is poverty, wanting food, wanting shelter, wanting to be saved, need, desire, begging. So, to Dickens, these were society's two main ills: ignorance of the upper class and the community and how they were ignoring the issue going on around them, and want, ignoring the want all around them. And that was personified in the three children, in the children that the ghost tells Scrooge of how he should fear them because it was a growing issue societally at the time. So there's a little hint of that in that section if you go back and look at that. And also in the artwork, we see the little children, we see a ghost, and in the background, you can see the workhouse with some smoke going up. I'll see if I can find one of those illustrations and put it in here. So a lot of people don't catch that in the artwork, the hidden messages in the artwork that speak of the themes of the message that Charles Dickens really wanted to teach in A Christmas Carol. Now it's true because of A Christmas Carol that shortly after its publication, Parliament passed a reform to limit children between the ages of 9 and 13 who worked in factories. They could only work 9 hours a day versus 6 days a week, 9 hours a day versus unlimited time, or 12 hours or 24 hours, which is still horrendous, but it is an improvement. And that was influenced directly through the movement of A Christmas Carol in the society in Victorian England and its aftermath, that small stone in the water and the ripple effect that it caused. Um, so, so there are a lot of messages you can really see inside of A Christmas Carol that if you read it not for the entertainment, for the brilliant writing. So I've read Christmas Carol so many times. You can read it for the entertainment. You can read it for the to study an example of brilliant, talented, descriptive writing and how to write fiction. You can read and study it for the to identify and study the themes, to study all the themes or to study one major theme, such as ignorance and want, as a constant theme from beginning to end. You can read it to study the historical context of the work, and not pay attention to the entertainment, not pay attention to the characterization or anything else. You can read it to look for to pinpoint and identify the analogies and the metaphors. So there's so much packed into this story, just compacted in there that you can pick and choose. And I've probably read it over a dozen times and the last 10, 12, once a year, 12 years. And every time it's like, that's why it doesn't feel redundant. So there are no other books that I've reread that I've ever wanted to reread because I have hundreds that I want to read, thousands. So, but this one, it's like every time you read it, it's like there's something new to discover, some new way to look at it, something that you missed the last time or the time before that, or a different viewpoint you can take on when you read it, or it just every time you read it, it feels like Christmas, you know? And so I really want to just emphasize, if you've never read A Christmas Carol, to really, and only seen the movies and you think you know it, read it to study it as a piece of brilliant classic literature, to understand how it made the canonization for the genre, to understand its thematic depth, the social commentary, the literary craft, the cultural impact, the character development, and the genre blending. I didn't even talk about the sort of fairy tale-ish like versions of it, or the social realism. Social realism is a whole genre. So obviously we have all the social issues packed in there, realistic social issues packed in there, a little bit of fantasy element because the ghosts that come down and the time travel is the fantasy part. So again, the genre blending is another whole essay you can write out of this story. So I really want you to just get in there and take a look of what you can see new this time if you've never read it. Look at my little baby book. So cute. I'm too old. I cannot read it. I'm too old right now, but with my eyesight, maybe if I have like my other glasses and a microscope. I'm going to switch over to my overhead and show you a few of these books. Please leave a comment below. Tell me what you thought of this lecture, if you learned anything new or enjoyed it. And thank you. Please subscribe, hit the bell for more great talks on classic literature. Merry Christmas. I'll see you in the next video. Let me just show you a few of these versions here. This one I got at Barnes & Noble. It might have it on Amazon. The Chiltern Classics are just a line of smaller hardback with gold embossment on the edges, spines, front cover, Chiltern Classics. They do a lot of classics. I have 5 or 6 of them. And they look really nice on the shelf. They're smaller, they're compact, they slip into your purse or your briefcase. They make nice little stocking stuffer gifts. They have a little bit of a shiny glossy page. So here we have the story with just some mini illustrations here. I don't know who does the art for this one, but it is the full Christmas Carol story. I don't know. I don't have time to look into that, but you can check out if it's on the Amazon page. Again, I'll link all of these books below. Again, this was Christmas with Charles Dickens. Cute little stocking stuffer. It's just a paperback, and it has these stories. So, A Christmas Dinner, the story of the goblins who stole a sexton, and what Christmas is when we grow older. Very good story, makes you really reflect. These are just some really short little Christmas stories you may never have heard of that Charles Dickens wrote. I highly recommend. So again, this is the Christmas Carol version by Stuart Tabor and Chang that I had for years. I don't know where I got it, if it's even still available. I'm actually going to look it up after this, and if I find it, I'll link it below. So it has more yellowish pages. It has some of the colorized, beautiful artwork. This is a New York company. I think they also have a UK location. Yeah, but it was a beautiful book. I don't love the more yellowish pages, but I feel like there's a lot more illustrations in here, so I don't know. I'm trying to remember. Is there any info? This follows the original text, first published 1843. These are illustrations by Everett Shinn from the 1938-1941 version. Yeah, so illustrations are not all the originals, but beautiful version of the book. Way less expensive than my gorgeous collectible Easton Press Christmas Carol by Robert Ingpen, which is a limited version. I've had this for about 4 or 5 years now. You can probably find it on eBay. It'll probably be a couple $100s. I'll see what version Easton Press has now. I don't know, but this is my favorite, the one I read every year. I think that was the certificate here, the limited certificate. But the illustrations are like paintings and just gorgeous, just beautiful. And I love the feel of this high-end Easton Press, thick paper, has the silk ribbon, gorgeous book. And of course it has the gold. And then of course I have the one my dad gave me. I think I saw one of these on Easton Press still. He gave me this probably a decade ago. I think I saw one. Like sometimes they come across some more, they print some more. I thought last year. In prose, my dad wrote in, 2013. So 12 years I've had this. To Emily from Dad, December 2013. Merry Christmas. Love, Dad. My dad died in 2023, 10 years after giving me this. So, but what I don't like about it is how the text is big and all spaced out more, like to fill the size, which I don't like. It makes the book heavier than it needs to be, so there's too much space between each line. And it looks more like it was done like on a typewriter. So it's not my favorite, which is a bummer because my dad gave it to me and wrote in it. But I really prefer, and it doesn't have the illustrations either, so I do really prefer my Robert Ingpen version. But it does have the cricket and the hearth. And what's the other story? Third love story. I don't remember. But anyway, amount of time I gotta leave here in a second. But I'm gonna show you this one, my baby one. There's actually a line of these books you can buy of other classics. Look how tiny it is in comparison to my hand. It probably looks like, I don't want to say Barbie size, like Cabbage Patch Doll size or something. I don't know, but no pictures, of course, just the text. I can't read it without my reading glasses. Has the characters. Who put this out? If I can get to the front page. Miniature. It's a German company, I guess. Ludwig or something, yeah. But yeah, it's got the, believe it or not, the full story in there. I don't know how, but you can carry that around. It'll be a fun little gift if you can find one or a different version of a different story. Obviously Christmas Carol is short, so you wouldn't be finding this in a Little Women version probably. All right, that's it, everybody. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video. See you again soon.